The small frontier town gathered at the whitewashed chapel that stood against the golden stretch of prairie. Dust from the morning breeze clung to boots and dresses, but no one paid it much mind. They had come to witness a wedding, one that was whispered about in hushed tones, with more curiosity than blessing. The bride, seated quietly in the far corner of the church, trembled under the heavy folds of her plain veil. She had not chosen this marriage. Her family, ruined by debt and shame, had given her hand to a rancher she barely knew, a man who, by all accounts, was steady and hard-working, but solitary. Her fingers twisted nervously in her lap, the thin gold band placed there earlier that morning cutting into her skin. She kept her head lowered, her heart thundering, her breath shallow. For years, people had looked at her with judgment, too thin, too scarred, too ordinary. She had grown used to whispers that she would never find a husband. When her father's debts crushed their small household, her worth had been reduced to one last bargain. The rancher, Thomas Hale, stood tall at the front of the chapel. Broad-shouldered, sun-weathered, his eyes carried both strength and sorrow. He had lost his first wife years ago in childbirth, and since then he had lived with a quiet loneliness, pouring his days into his cattle and his land. His daughter, a shy little girl of 6, clutched the hem of his coat, peeking curiously at the veiled woman who would become her stepmother. The preacher's words floated through the chapel, binding them in vows that seemed heavy with both hope and despair. The bride could barely force the words past her lips. When it came time to lift her veil, she shrank back, her hands darting up to cover her face. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Shame burned her cheeks. She had heard enough cruel words in her life to know what people thought of her: unremarkable, unworthy, too plain to stand beside a man like Thomas. Tears stung behind the fabric, and her chest tightened with dread. Then, in the silence, she felt a gentleness she had not expected. Calloused fingers, roughened by years of ranch work, did not grasp or force. Instead, they lingered at the edge of her veil, lifting it slowly, carefully, as if handling something delicate. Her breath caught. When the cloth slipped away, she could not bring herself to meet his eyes. She half turned her face, trying to shield herself from the judgment she had braced for. But Thomas did not flinch, nor did he frown. His gaze was steady, his expression soft. "You're beautiful," he said simply. The words fell into the silence like a drop of water on parched earth. Her throat tightened, her body trembling at the kindness she had not expected. For the first time in years, she dared to look up. His eyes, clear, warm, and unwavering, held none of the scorn she had grown so used to. Instead, they carried honesty, a gentle truth that settled deep inside her wounded heart. The ceremony ended, and the crowd dispersed, some disappointed there had been no scandal to whisper about. But for the bride, the world had shifted. Those 3 words had pierced through the walls of shame she had built around herself. Their married life began quietly. She moved into his ranch house, a sturdy place with wide windows and the scent of pine. At first, she tiptoed around, uncertain where she belonged. She cooked, cleaned, and kept to herself, convinced she must prove her worth. But Thomas never asked for proof. He noticed how she folded his daughter's dresses with care, how she tended the small patch of garden with gentle hands. He noticed how her eyes softened when she thought no one was watching, how she hummed softly while mending clothes by the fire. There were nights she would sit by the window, veil still folded carefully in a trunk nearby, staring at the moonlit prairie. He would come quietly, standing beside her, his presence steady and sure. Slowly, she began to realize he was not a man who judged by appearances. He saw deeper. One evening, as rain pattered against the roof, she confessed in a trembling voice the words that had weighed her down for years. "People have always said I'm not enough. Too plain, too scarred. I thought you'd see the same." Thomas reached for her hand, his grip warm and strong. "Scars mean you've lived. Plain is only what others choose not to see. I see you." Tears welled in her eyes, but for once they were not born of shame, they were born of something else. Healing. As weeks turned to months, the fragile bond between them deepened. His daughter, who had watched her with quiet caution at first, began slipping her small hand into hers, asking her to braid her hair, whispering bedtime secrets. One night, the little girl pressed her cheek to her new mother's arm and whispered, "You're beautiful, just like Papa says." The words broke something open in her, filling her heart with a warmth she had never known. On a golden autumn morning, while helping Thomas mend a broken fence, she paused, watching him work with steady determination. He looked up, meeting her gaze, and for the first time she let herself smile without holding back. The shame that had once defined her slowly unraveled. She was no longer the woman who hid behind a veil. She was a wife, a mother, a woman seen and cherished. Thomas, too, found his own healing in her presence. Where grief had hollowed him out, her quiet resilience and tender strength began to fill the emptiness. He had not only gained a partner but also found someone who reminded him that love was not about perfection, but about truth, the kind spoken in a simple phrase on their wedding day. "You're beautiful," and in time, she believed it too.